2 years ago, on January 6, 2021, thousands of citizens from across the United States stormed the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. Their goal? Preventing the certification of the election, which 3 months earlier had made Joe Biden president. The Capitol uprising was an unprecedented event in the nation's history. But the impassioned and destructive forces at play that day were not born on January 6th. They were the outcome, as my book Subtle Tools argues, of a trend that had begun 2 decades earlier in the aftermath of Al-Qaeda's attacks on the United States on September 11th, 2001. In response to the threat of terrorism, officials and lawmakers utilized a set of tools to create policies that knowingly undermined the very tenets of democracy. Those subtle tools included an excessive embrace of secrecy, the strategic exploitation of vagueness in law and policy, the disruption of procedural norms, and a willful disregard for the law. Their collective aim was to enhance the powers of the president while obstructing accountability for acts taken in the name of national security. Throughout his presidency, Trump championed the use of these subtle tools, well beyond the national security framework. He turned the penchant for secrecy and the war on terror into an official disregard for creating the record in the first place. For example, by forbidding note-taking at high-level meetings, and by failing to comply with lawful reporting requirements, such as on the use of drone warfare by the United States. He bypassed long-standing procedural norms as well by repeatedly evading Senate confirmation of his appointees and creating a path for political appointees to occupy positions traditionally occupied by civil servants. He blurred the powers of separate agencies in an effort to obstruct accountability. For example, when he deployed Southern border guards to counter Black Lives Matter protesters on the West Coast. He indulged in vagueness and its twin, excessive breadth, notably, for example, when he banned virtually all individuals from 6 Muslim countries from entering the US. In each case, he wielded the subtle tools. On January 6, 2021, Trump once again beat his chest in tribute to those tools of vagueness, secrecy, imprecision, and disregard for law and process. He called on Vice President Pence to do the right thing and ignore the law of the land and procedural norms by refusing to certify the 2020 election of Joe Biden. He appointed unconfirmed, top-ranking security and law enforcement officials whose loyalty was to him rather than the Constitution, and who failed to deploy agents for hours during the January 6 riots as the lives and limbs of lawmakers were threatened by armed insurrectionists. And adhering to the mantra of secrecy, Trump's Secret Service officials then destroyed emails pertinent to January 6th. Well into the presidency of Joe Biden, Trump and his allies are continuing along this path of secrecy, disdain for norms, and a willful disregard for the law, withholding documents and testimony, threatening to upend the electoral process, and spreading falsehoods, testing the resilience of our democracy. The Biden administration has taken some steps to counter the impact that the use of the subtle tools enabled. Honoring procedural norms and specificity in the initial flurry of executive orders issued at the start of his presidency, Biden implicitly rebuked the indulgence in vagueness and imprecision that had defined the war on terror and the Trump presidency. And his administration has noted the value of transparency, for example, in reversing the Trump policy of refusing to make public the numbers of U.S. nuclear weapons. And his director of national intelligence has vowed to turn back the tide of excessive secrecy, gesturing towards that end by releasing previously withheld intelligence reports on the murder of Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi. He restored the traditional appointments process for civil servants. He has clarified and deepened the norms and authorities within departments of the executive. But these are minor advances towards the restoration of transparency, accountability, good governance, and the rule of law. It is not enough to address, reform, and even reverse the outcomes the subtle tools enabled. It is the tools themselves that must be addressed, both in policy and in practice, and by legislation, if need be. The bottom line and the central argument of the book is that unless and until we acknowledge and counter the uses of the subtle tools and the damage they have wrought, we as a nation are vulnerable to their misuse in the future.